please. And if you don't want to be involved, that's okay. Alright, so I need everyone up here, except for I need the pin, stage left, and I need everyone else to be stage right, okay? I'm gonna come up here so I can have a little more fun. Alright, and if you are one of my people I did not call, you're my crowd, and can you come sit in the middle of these two aisles, one of those two? Thank you. Okay, oh Jesus. Where's Austin? Austin, this is yours. Don't eat it. Okay. One day, Jesus was hanging out with his disciples near Lake Galilee. So enter Jesus and the disciples. All of the disciples, except for Judas, because Judas and Simon are disciples, so they're here too. Yeah. All of the disciples, no, not Tim, sorry, bro. All of the disciples, except for Judas, were doing jumping jacks in an attempt to show who was the strongest and greatest disciple. Judas was counting out loud the number of jumping jacks the others were doing. Judas was always counting. He could even count in several different languages. Suddenly, a large crowd arose. And they all looked towards Jesus. As the crowd was standing, the disciples stopped jumping and shouted, "Crowd, sit down!" Crowd, sit down! Hey! The crowd was thankful. Oh, Jesus frowned at the disciples and raised his eyebrows. As the disciples knew what this meant, so they shouted, "Crowd, please sit down!" Crowd, please sit down! The crowd was thankful the disciples were so polite, and they shouted, "Thank you, disciples!" Thank you, disciples! The disciples shouted back, "You're welcome, crowd!" You're welcome, crowd! After the pleasant exchange, Jesus sat on the smiling hill. The hill smiled. The crowd shouted, "Nice smile!" Nice smile! To Jesus' surprise, the smiling hill had the hiccups. It hiccuped with convulsions for 5 times, but kept smiling the entire time. Jesus was still sitting on the hill and was tossed back and forth. After the hill stopped hiccuping, Judas approached Jesus and put his foot on the smiling hill. And said, "There are at least 5,000 people here, and they're all hungry."
There are at least 5,000 people here. They're all hungry.
Jesus put his right hand over his eyes to block the sun and scare the crowd. He said, "Excellent counting, Judas."
Excellent counting,
Judas smiled. He took his foot off the smiling hill and said, "Thank you, Jesus. That was so kind of you to notice my excellent counting."
Thank you, Jesus. Some kind of news. That was my excellent counting.
Judas put his other foot on the smiling hill. Jesus said, "You're welcome."
You're welcome.
Both the crowd and the disciples gave Judas and Jesus applause for being so polite to each other. After the talking died down, Jesus said to Judas, "Is there a local 7-Eleven where you can buy Slurpees and beef jerky for all these people?" No, Jesus is saying that to you. Judas said, "We would have to work for 418 hours, 37 minutes, and 19 seconds at minimum wage to have enough money to buy food for all these people."
We would have to work 37 hours, 45 minutes, wages to feed all these people.
The crowd of disciples gave Judas applause not for his quick mathematical addition, but because he could remember such a long sentence for this melodrama.
Yeah.
Just then, Simon, another one of Jesus' disciples, jumped to his feet and rushed over to Jesus. He put his foot on the smiling hill. Timmy and said, "There's a boy with 4 Twinkies and 3 pieces of bologna." 4.
4 Twinkies, 2 pieces of bologna.
Oh, I meant to say 5, either way. Jesus said, "Stand up, boy."
Stand up, boy.
Timmy stood and walked over to Jesus and put one foot on the smiling hill. When Timmy wasn't looking, Judas stole 1 piece of bologna and quickly shoved it in his mouth.
Quickly, is it?
Jesus held open a paper bag for Timmy to put his food in. As Timmy dropped his food into the bag, he noticed he was missing a piece of bologna. Timmy stood there looking confused. Timmy then looked bewildered, perplexed, and mystified. Which were really the same looks as confused, because those words were in the thesaurus under the word confused. Timmy now looked even more confused. But the crowd understood and gave him some applause. Shouted, "Judas stole the bologna, I saw him."
Judas stole the bologna, I saw him.
The crowd quickly turned to look at Judas. The crowd said, "Ooh." And ah. Just then, Smiling Hill burst. This silenced the crowd. It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Enter the pin. Just then, the pin dropped to the floor, making a loud noise. The crowd groaned because of this dumb gag. The pin groaned because it was a lousy part in the melodrama. Everyone was still looking at Judas. Judas looked frightened. So frightened that his knees were shaking. Jesus said, "Relax, man. This won't be the only time you're in trouble."
Relax, man. This will be the only time you're in trouble.
Jesus then said, "Everyone stand up." Up. The crowd shouted in unison, "Only if you say please."
Only if you say please. Wait. Everybody stand up. Only if you say please.
Jesus smiled and winked at the smiling hill because he knew his good manners were rubbing off on the crowd. Okay, Jesus blinked. Okay, and then Jesus said, "Please."
Please.
And everyone stood up. Jesus then said, "Put your right hand in. Put your right hand out. Put your right hand in. And shake it all out." The crowd followed Jesus' instructions. The crowd smiled because they knew that someday they would be mentioned as part of the first ever Hokey Pokey dance. Jesus then said, "Please, everyone sit down."
Please, everyone sit down.
Jesus held the paper bag in front of the crowd and thanked God for the food, saying, "Thanks, God, for this food."
Thanks, God, for this food.
The crowd cheered for the prayer. Jesus began to hand out tons of bologna and Twinkies. Imaginary, of course, this is a skit, not a real thing. Each person from the crowd gladly accepted the imaginary food and ate with imaginary delight. To eat, Jesus said to his disciples, "Gather the leftover bologna and Twinkies so nothing is wasted." The disciples skipped and whistled through the crowd, collecting the imaginary food. You're skipping through the crowd. Go! They gathered up enough imaginary food to fill 12 imaginary baskets. When the crowd realized that they had witnessed a miracle, everyone looked bewildered, perplexed, and mystified. Timmy smiled because he knew what that felt like. The crowd shook the look off their faces and said, "Wow! Wow! Incredible! Incredible! Never in my whole life!" The crowd stood to their feet and cheered cheered silently. Jesus and his disciples left during the commotion. The crowd picked up the smiling hill, the green crowd, picked up the smiling hill and walked off stage. Timmy was left all alone. Timmy was left all alone, still smiling. He said, "This must be the prophet who came to save us."